Do you remember this story from your primary school days? King Alfred the Great is on the run from the Vikings, right? And he dives into this vast network of salty marshes that completely covered this area during the 9th century. And he sees this little mud hut that belongs to a swineherd and his wife, and he tells them that he's a deserter from the English army, and they agree to hide him. And the swineherd goes off and gets on with his jobs. She goes off and does her chores. And Alfred's sitting there, completely wrapped in thought, and he doesn't notice this huge black cloud pouring out of the fire, and the swineherd's wife comes back in, and she is absolutely livid. "You couldn't be bothered to keep an eye on my cakes, could you?" she says. "But you wouldn't mind shoveling them down your throat when they were baked, would you greedy fat lummox?" So what does Alfred do? Does he storm off in some kingly huff? No, Alfred the Great is a man of the people. He's like some 9th century Che Guevara figure. He just apologises profusely, and in some royal way that I've never quite understood, he uses the whole experience as a kind of learning curve that enables him to gather all his people together and lead them in another charge against the Vikings. So, is that just a little romantic tale? Or was it based in historical fact? Well, the Time team is in Somerset this week, on the Somerset levels, and we're here because one particular Somerset family has got a very interesting piece of Alfred's history right on their doorstep, and they'd like us to try and sort it out for them.
Dear Time team, for over 50 years my family and I have farmed at Athelney. We are aware it is the site of Alfred's Abbey, and it is believed he had a fort here. Can you produce any evidence of those buildings and show what Athelney looked like in Alfred's time? Yours sincerely, Tim Morgan, Athelney Farm.
This week's Time team are Mick Aston, Bristol University landscape archaeologist, Jerry Barber, Bristol University environmental archaeologist, Phil Harding, Wessex Archaeological Trust field archaeologist, Carenza Lewis, Royal Commission on Historic Monuments, Robin Bush, archivist, and Victor Ambrose, historical illustrator. Operating from their base, the George Hotel in Wedmore, the Time team have just 3 days to find the answers. Right, so evidence of the fort. What did Athelney look like? And Mr. Morgan asks, why was he great?
Well, I think we can tackle the first bits about Athelney itself. I mean, the obvious thing there is to do some field walking and some geophysics and so on. Let's really have a look at what's under there, because it's been ploughed a lot, so it's fairly flattened.
It's scheduled, isn't it? So, in other words, we can't put a trench in.
No.
So, yeah, I mean, the best option got to be field walking.
What's scheduled mean?
Well, I mean, it's a protected site. Yeah. It's against the law to start disturbing a scheduled monument other than what its current land use is.
I thought archaeologists had been wrecking sites for 60, 70 years.
Oh, we have, but it's all in the name of science. I mean,
well, let's go then, shall we?
Okay, yeah.
The Isle of Athelney is in Somerset, situated here to the southwest of Wedmore and about 10 miles from Taunton. Although it's scheduled, amazingly very little archaeological work has been done here. So this weekend presents the Time team with a really valuable opportunity to discover more evidence about Alfred and his secret hiding place in the marshes.
As we come here, you can see in front the island of Athelney actually started.
That's
so
it, up there.
The causeway actually goes off along there, and we come off down into the what was back onto the marsh, really.
Yeah, this is all fen, isn't it?
Well, it's drained today, but it would have been very boggy up until the Middle Ages. There's the causeway, as you see, coming into the island itself. And then as we get along here a bit further, you'll actually see that it's not a very prominent feature, but it's just enough to lift it above the marshes and the...
That's the island, is it?
Yeah. There it is. That's great. Okay, let's all pile out and have a chat with him. Hello, are you Mr. Morgan?
That's Right.
Hello, my name's Mick Aston from the Time team.
How do you do?
This is Phil Harding.
How do you do?
So, Robbie, what's the significance of this place, apart from the fact that Alfred hid in a few square miles of bog? What does it tell us?
Well, really, I suppose it is that was the kingdom of the West Saxons, or even the kingdom of the Saxon English. At one point, in the time that we're discussing this weekend, in 878, Alfred's kingdom had shrunk to the few acres that surround Athelney. The particular reason why we know so much about Alfred is from the fact that a chap called Asser, who was a Welsh friend of his and became one of his bishops, wrote a very detailed life about him. It's the only life of a Saxon king that we have of that kind. At the time that we're talking about, he was just coming up to 30. He was the fourth son of his father, and in fact the fourth son to be king. I don't suppose he ever expected to be king in his early years, with 3 elder brothers between him and the throne, but he had a horrendous situation to face, because the Danes had literally split England in two. They'd cruelly slaughtered most of the kings of places like Northumbria and East Anglia, and were obviously intent on taking the rest of England for themselves. But I think he wanted to get where people who didn't know the exact lie of the land wouldn't find him. He didn't, by all accounts, have very many followers with him, and so he ended up at the Isle of Athelney. The very word means the island of the princes.
I think we've got 2 jobs to do, haven't we, really? We've got to see whether we can find where the fort was.
Yes.
And then the other one is to see if we can find where the Abbey was and see if there's any early Abbey stuff.
Sounds interesting.
Well, we'll see how we get on.
Wait, see how we get on first, yeah. I see what the place looks like.
Yeah,
we want to go and have a look at it first, really, when we get a feel for it.
Jerry would like to dig a trench, so you ought to talk to...
I'll have to have a chat with you about it.
Perhaps if you talk to Mr. Morgan about that now, and then we can go off the rest of us up on the top, and we can have a look round and see where we might start, and I'll come back to see you later on. Okay?
All right.
So you sort out with them where you want to put your stuff. Okay, so
Yes,
up on the top
will
then.
be.
Right.
The monument here, I think, is where the Abbey was.
Right, yeah.
And we're assuming, and I think, having thought about it a bit, we probably are assuming that the other end is where the fort is. So really, there's 2 mounds here, 1 fort, 1 abbey, and it's really what you're going to be able to do at each end.
So the work begins. Phil and Carenza are surveying Mr. Morgan's land and marking out reference grids at the site. These grids will be important as they'll enable both the geophysics team and the field walkers to plot their finds accurately.
Robin, this is Mick here out at Athelney.
Could you give me that Asser quote again about Athelney? Because we're out on the site now. Over.
Right, Mick. A formidable fortress of elegant workmanship was set up by the command of the king at the western end of the causeway. Okay, over.
Thanks very much. Cheers, then.
What I will do, if that's okay with you, is to put an auger in first, which is a long soil corer, so I can
Yes.
get a little bit of soil out,
All
and then I
right.
can actually see what's down the bottom. And if I do a few of those, sort of along the edge of there, then I might be able to get an idea of what's going on underneath the ground, and then find the best place to put your trench. We're going to try and work out what Athelney looked like in the time of King Alfred. I think that's the best place to start.
So who are the people who are attacking him?
Guthrum, king of the Danes, who is pursuing him, trying to find out where he is, and wreak one of those peculiarly nasty vengeances which the Vikings had up their sleeves. They practiced what was known as the blood eagle, which was a peculiarly nasty form of death in which they kind of slit the victim down the front while living, peeled back the ribs, and then flung back on either side the lungs to form a living blood eagle.
It's so disgusting.
It is absolutely revolting. And if that wasn't enough, you know, they went in for a tidy bit of crucifixion, by the way. You are talking about rather brutal, ruthless men.
Now, I've always assumed that part of this was simply black propaganda put about by the Anglo-Saxons because they were on the losing end. The Vikings really were as barbaric as they were painted.
Yeah, I mean, this was really a sacrifice to their gods. This was the way they sacrificed to Odin, basically. And so it was part of their ritual, if you like, part of their religion.
soil's already started to change colour. Actually, we're getting down quite far. If you compare that to this stuff we've got at the top here, that's the sort of thing we're looking for, though, the difference in the soil change. We're going to try and get the profile.
The geophysics team start work at the fort site, and using a technique called magnetometry, they begin to look for evidence of the fort. The way this technique works is that objects or buried structures in the ground interfere with the Earth's magnetic fields in different ways, and this machine measures the difference.
There we are, you can see we're right in the middle of the Somerset Levels landscape, this lowland, waterlogged landscape as it would have existed. And below us, the whole landscape is crisscrossed with these drainage reeds, including areas that are flooded still today.
Oh yeah, over there you can actually see contemporary flooding. I suppose that's what the whole area
would have been a complete mess of bogs, watery areas, bits of woodland, and these little knolls of land sticking out of it. Here's Burrow Mump, which used to be thought to be the Alfred Fort. Here, look, Tony. We're now fairly sure was, if nothing else, perhaps just a lookout post with a Norman castle on the top of it, and then the church put on the top of that later on.
Is that a natural feature? It looks
man-made. It's another one of these lumps sticking out of the levels. Now, this is Athelney now. You can just see the outline of the field boundaries outlining the slightly higher land. You can see the farm on the end, and then we're going to be field walking that strip by the monument, which has now got teasels in it, but which is where the Abbey was. And then there's the field we're going to be field walking in, the big brown field, and there's the chaps with the geophysics there. Can you see the outline? It's like a big sort of flat date. We'll get that a bit higher up in a moment.
And what does that represent?
That's just the higher land sticking out of the marsh at this point. It's just one little hill, another little hill, and the little hill with the Abbey on the end.
And that's Athelney.
And that's Athelney.
It's a bit of an anti-climax after somewhere like Glastonbury Tor, isn't it?
Well, that's right, but it's a great place to hide, you see. Here it is, tucked out in the marshes. You can hardly see it. It's only about 30 feet high above the surrounding land anyway. Marshes all around, swamp.
So we're not looking for a powerful fort, which is like a statement of power like the Normans might have had.
I don't think so. I think this is a guerrilla base. He's hiding out here. The reason it can't be the place with the church on it is it's too small. This place here, you could lay lots of tents and things out in it. You know, you could camp a lot of people on that. Difficult to imagine that the whole future of southern England hinged on this one spot for a few brief weeks or months. The little village that's coming now is Eastling, and at the end of Eastling, coming into view now, you can see the church.
Yeah.
And the church sits on the line of the defences, and that was the main defence that defended the access to Athelney itself. Now, if we can climb very high now, Mike, you can see from here the line of the defences. Beyond that, you can see the brown field of the fort of Athelney, and beyond that, the farm marking the Abbey site built as a dedication. So you've got the whole of the core of this guerrilla base. I still think is the best word for it. You know, this is where they were holed up.
So poor old Alfred's stuck down there somewhere. All that's left of his kingdom is about 25 square miles of bog. Any moment now, Christian England could be wiped out. We could all end up speaking Danish. What happened next? See you after the break. This is what it must have been like for Alfred. I can't even move, let alone run away from any Vikings. So, what happened to him? Was he split down the middle and had all his guts scooped out until his lungs were flapping around by his ears? No, of course not. We may have to take Asser's biography with a pinch or two of salt, but basically his character analysis of Alfred seems to have been about right. People trusted him, they liked him, they believed he was working in their interests, and so they followed him. And miraculously, within a year of his terrible defeat, he got all the people round here together, and they'd marched out, and they defeated the Vikings at the Battle of Edington. And that's when this weird double act started. As soon as the battle was over, saintly Alfred converted horrible Guthrum to Christianity, and immediately they started going on this strange procession all round the Somerset lowlands, all round the places where Alfred had been hiding just a few months previously, with Guthrum all dressed in white to symbolise his conversion to Christianity. It's very odd. Although actually I feel a bit like Alfred and Guthrum at the moment. It's Saturday morning. I've been wandering around this smelly marsh for the last 24 hours trying to get this story together, and I've got absolutely no idea what the archaeologists have been doing at all. I think if it's all right with you lot, I'll climb out of here and get back to the real world. Can someone give us a hand, please? I'm stuck.
I think we've done pretty well yesterday. We got the grid in on one area, but I reckon we're going to probably have to crack on with the other area as well, because otherwise I don't think it's any good putting all our eggs in one basket. I mean, I don't think there's any good just constantly walking or solely walking the fort. I think we've got to get up where the Abbey is as well.
Well, I'm really interested in the geophysics results up on the fort, because I think that's really critical. If you can turn up any features, anything that looks significant, I think that's going to tell us much more than the pottery, anything we pick up in field walking, really.
We're actually finding features or anomalies which we take to be archaeological. They're not necessarily the fort yet, we don't know this, but all we can say for certain is that we've actually got a linear coming along here, and in fact the linear it's quite an unusual response, or unusual magnetic response, because it's very strong, and it looks like it might be a ditch that's infilled with industrial activity.
You try that in with
Yes,
your...
yeah, that'd be no problem.
Tony.
I've got the aerial photos. Yeah, we will.
Well, we've had a long discussion.
Don't be
I
too
think we've
I'm not surprised. You're very good at that.
long breakfast it was. The geophysics chaps are going to carry on with the fort end. They're going to go and look at the Abbey end as well.
Yeah.
And they're going to do some resistivity on the Abbey, which will hopefully give us a better plan, or closer plan to that. They're going to pursue the interesting features they've got at this end. The field workers are already out there. They'll be picking bits up. Jerry's going to be drilling some holes round, looking at the environmental evidence, and Phil and Corenz will be going out doing the surveying and keeping the job going up there.
Can I just interrupt you a minute? Can I just have your opinion on this? Look, Jerry and I have just been looking at this photo. This is the fort area that we're looking at. Can you actually see those sort of black lines coming around here? Are they intermittent, messed around? They're coming right round there. Yeah. You could almost see a circular structure going right round there. That could be the site of the fort.
Well, that's the area we're moving into, isn't
exactly,
it?
Exactly, that's the side of the
What is it?
Well, it's a black splodge. But, I mean, I don't know, maybe when you've looked at it a bit and thought about it, it gets more and more convincing the more you look at it, but that sort of dark line could be a ditch.
So Corenza thinks she may have found the fort, and she now plans to enlarge the 1946 air photograph on the computer to see if she can bring out any more detail. Victor is drawing the landscape as it would have looked in Alfred's day.
I've been doing some coring work around Athelney, outside the Scheduled Monument area, and I found that it's very wet. Problem is there's no peat, so I can't actually give a date for this stuff. What I want to do, though, is have a look at the causeway and get a section through that. Yeah. So would it be possible, do you think, to put a ditch through the edge of the causeway away from the road?
That's a possibility, but I think you may have a problem with the depth that you need to excavate, and that's something we'd need to look at.
I think with waterlogging or...
And the sheer volume that you would have to get through to get into the peat, which may be 1 metre or 2 metres down.
I also want to do some coring around the outside of the rest of the monument to get a soil survey of the entire area.
Yeah.
It just looks wet, very wet, and even more wet.
Yeah, well, I think you'll confirm that, but it will be useful.
I don't understand about this procession that Alfred and Guthrum made through Somerset. What were they doing?
Well, it was an elaborate ceremonial which I suspect Alfred wanted to take place on a succession of his own royal estates. So he starts off at Alla, where Guthrum gets baptised under the Saxon Christian name of Athelstan. Then he wheels him over here to Wedmore, where 8 days after, the ceremony of chrism loosening, the kind of... I know, it sounds almost obscene, doesn't it? But the fillet of cloth around Guthrum's head would have been removed, again with great ceremonial. And then they talk about 11 days of jollifications, when the king gave Guthrum and his followers, who numbered 30, elaborate presents.
And where did these take place?
Well, it isn't too clear. It could either have been at Wedmore, where I suspect there was a church situation, a religious community, or possibly at Cheddar, where they had, the West Saxon kings had their major palace.
So what was it all for? Was it essentially religious, or was Alfred showing his people, you know, what a great guy he was by humbling the terrible vulture Guthrum?
It was an endeavour to put an end to what had plagued him ever since he came to the throne, and, of course, he and his father even before that. And to set the seal on the promises that the Danes had made to leave the West Saxon kingdom forever, which, in fact, is what they did. They went back to Chippenham, then to Cirencester, and finally as far away as you could get to the east, to East Anglia, where Guthrum lives out his days peacefully as a Christian king until he finally snuffs it.
We're going to try and get it sharpened up, zoom in on it, have a good look at it, get a printout of it to scale. He just says he can actually overlay it over the 2500 here, would be excellent. Yeah. And then we can get a larger one blown up and get the detail
I
of it.
feel very sceptical about this, you know.
You still don't like it?
Well, I've been trying to think of the context in which we would get marks like that at that time of year. It's January 1947. It's a bit after autumn ploughing, it's a bit early for spring ploughing, you know. Why would we be seeing it at that time of the year?
Well, it's a soil mark, isn't it? I mean, it's this looks like stubble here, and that looks like that might have been ploughed. I mean, it's a bit after ploughing, yeah, but the soil's had time to weather, so you'd expect the contrast to start to show up a bit more.
In a way, it's the sort of thing you'd expect to show up perhaps in May, June.
Well, that would be in crops, wouldn't it? But this is soil marks. I'm not too bothered about it. I just think it's there. We found it. It's exciting. We've actually found something that could be the right. It's roughly the right shape. It's roughly the right size. Or it's a shape and a size that aren't unreasonable.
It's the shape of it that also worries me. I mean, here's Alfred, presumably with his back to the wall. He's coming in, you know, retreating to this. Why does he lay out a circular site, you know?
It's not that difficult. Well, I mean, it's easier to lay out a circular site. It's got something nice and regular with corners, isn't it?
Well, yes, but why not just fence around the island and sort of camp in it?
I mean, a circle's the easiest site, but if it is a temporary encampment, the circle is the easiest defendable site, isn't it? And then just put a ditch in to formalise it, strengthen it up a bit later.
I feel sceptical about it.
You're not cynic, Mick.
I
think
am.
It's there, it's exciting.
I've got it on the map here. This is the causeway coming along here. And as you look, it goes away from the road and carries straight on into the field. There's a lot of rabbit holes, isn't there?
Yeah, caused by a lot of rabbits.
So they must be rather modern.
And they would have disturbed most of the upper layers, in fact. Yeah. So we need to go along to
So we can't really dig here, there's no point. The reason I would like to look in this bank is because we can't date our soil, our clay, over by the fish ponds.
Right.
We can't date anything around Athelney. What we want to do is get a section through here, see if we can find some pottery that we can tie in with the soil layers. Now, would that actually be feasible? Do you think we'll find Saxon pottery?
There may be
a causeway ditch along here.
Opportunities once we get through this.
So we're both agreed. I mean, out of the orchard's a bad idea. So if we carry on a bit.
The orchard's a bad idea. We need to be at the other end where there could be stratified layers.
Well, this is what I'm hoping.
You all right? And mind the rabbit hole.
It's now 2 o'clock on Saturday afternoon, and Phil and his volunteer field walkers seem to be making pretty good progress at the fort site. The basic idea is that they pick up anything that looks interesting and pop it into a bag, and it'll be sorted out later. The geophysics team are now working on the Abbey site, looking for traces of Alfred's Abbey, but they've decided to use a different technique called resistivity.
Mr. Morgan, you're the landowner of this ground, then?
Yes, I've been here quite a long time now.
Did your family been in here longer than that, or...?
Well, my family came from Wedmore, where they've been for many hundreds of years.
Yeah?
Yes, which, of course, is not very far away from
No. Well, we've been having some quite interesting times up here, as you can see. I expect you
Oh,
wonder
yes,
what all these canes are doing here.
In the cabbage patch.
That's right.
Yes.
Well, what we've done is we've laid out a grid.
Oh, yes.
And then each person, each field walker, walks around in the 10-metre square for 20 minutes. And in that time, anything that they find goes into the bag.
Yes.
And actually, we found some quite, or something in particular, which is very interesting. This object here.
Yes, well, we don't see that sort of thing every day, you know.
Well, we think it's a piece of metal slag. The people who did their geophysical survey up here did actually detect strong indications of metalwork actually in the ground.
Yeah.
And this bit we've actually found on the surface, obviously been dragged up by the plough.
Very interesting, unique, I should say.
It seems a bit unbelievable that that lump of metal slag might just hold the key to the history of this site. Is it possible it could have come from a Saxon furnace and sat in the Morgan's field for over 1,000 years, just waiting for us to pick it up? Or more likely, will it relate to another period of the field's history? Will it turn out to be a piece of interesting but irrelevant Victorian slag? Meanwhile, Jerry's luck isn't getting any better, and she's more or less run out of time.
This really stops us digging into this side of the bank.
I'm afraid it does. We
whatsoever.
can't work anywhere near where the badgers are. That's one of the constraints with the new Badger Act, so we can't go there.
Right, so we've really written off the idea of a JCB into this
I
ditch
think
whatsoever.
that wouldn't help us a great deal, and there are a lot of problems.
Right, OK, we better go then.
Yep.
Hello, Matt. I'm told there's some good results coming up on the geophysics. Any chance of you getting over to have a look at them when they're ready? Over.
Hello, Phil. Yeah, it's Mick. We've just arrived in the Land Rover. Where are you, over?
We're up by the monument with the geophysics boys, and they're getting quite excited. In fact, we're all getting quite excited. You've got a timely arrival. Get on up here and have a look at them. Over. OK, we'll bring you some special pills to calm you down. We're on our way. Over.
Is it as good as radar?
It's a different technique. You know, we use radar on deeper stuff. Hey, I'm Phil.
Yeah.
How you get on? Hello.
Have a look at this then.
Come for some excitement.
Anything for you here?
Jolly good. That's
This
good.
is it.
Now, you do remember at breakfast this morning, the last comment was geophysics will be the answer to it all.
Yeah.
Right, well, you're now going to see in front of your very eyes a plot that will astound you. This is if the technology works. What we've just been saying, we've actually used the resistance technique here around the monument, and that's when we're sending the electric current into the ground. And where you've got the buried walls, we'll get high resistance readings, is the theory, and we should be able to build up a plan. You know, so if there are any Abbey remains under here, then the hope is that we'll get a detailed picture. Where we get high resistance, we'll have dark concentrations of dots on the paper, and where we've got white areas, that's away from the walls.
So we're looking at moisture content here, and moisture, there's very little moisture when you get towards stone walls, so we get nice dark readings. That's when the resistance is going up.
So all the walls are aligned east west.
Truth, look at that.
It's pretty amazing.
That's the monastic church, is it, at the top?
We're not very happy with this, actually, Nick. We have to play around with this to get the levels right, but you can see we're getting...
Church, aisles. That's fantastic. You see the lines.
It's going to make a lot of archaeologists redundant. This new technology.
Can we have it over here?
Yeah.
Just to get, because we're actually orientated about like that, aren't we?
That's right. The actual monument itself, the iron railings, are where we've got the very small squares here.
Yeah.
And so a very clear plan of the building, the orientation.
And this is actually this has never been excavated. There's no pictures, there's no prints, there's no drawings. So this is actually the first time anybody's ever seen
it.
The layout of the church of Athelney Abbey. That's incredible, because we could almost get a reconstruction from Victor of that. You know,
well, that's it. I mean, we'll be able to compare this with the documentary evidence, plus other Abbey plans that are known.
Yeah, that's great.
Yes, it's great.
So Athelney Abbey actually started
And they've actually got the monument right
just about here and spread all the way back past that monument there, and no one knew about it for centuries and centuries till about 3 minutes ago. I think that's a pretty good first for Time Team.
I think this is pretty staggering, and they said it was one of the best results they'd ever had because it's actually mapped the outline of the church, right? And you can see the sort of central aisle. You can see the what must be the chancel area, the crossing area. It looks as if we've got some transepts. We've certainly got some aisles.
This is the 14th, 15th century Abbey, isn't it? Any chance they could pick up the Saxon Abbey?
Well, I've asked them if they can look at the data that's produced this and fiddle around with it, because this is a fairly crude version. They've got various ways of enhancing things, and we might actually be able to break this down a little bit.
Remember, we had this air photograph delivered at breakfast time. I've taken this off and had a look at this feature that we thought might be an enclosure or fort or something on it. I managed to get them to blow it up on the computer imaging, and I sort of picked out the main features. This is actually at 1:2500, so we can map this onto the Ordnance Survey map.
This is your mystery ring?
This is it, yes. It does have a sort of suggestion that there is an enclosure, and we don't know what date it is. This is the real problem. Is actually, it's not just me imagining it. It does come up in other ways as well.
It does look remarkably prehistoric.
It does. It does.
It's
It's a bit
round, isn't it? Yeah, it's like some sort of Iron Age farmstead.
It does. It does.
Yeah.
But we didn't know it was there before.
Well, I mean, that's
then.
great. I mean, we
That's
did say right at the beginning that there might actually be some prehistoric stuff here.
Yeah.
So what are we going to do tomorrow?
We've got quite a bit of sorting out to do as well, Tony, because we've now all the field walking's complete on the areas that they've ploughed with crops in, and we've got a lot of bags of stuff that need to be gone through, at least in a preliminary way, to see what's in there.
I'd like to have a look at some of those, especially if there's going to be bone in there.
One of the things that's come out straight away is this thing, which has been some debate about. Well, you feel how heavy it is to start with.
Christ, is that?
I think it's probably a bloom. That is the original lump of iron that's produced in the early furnaces, and it rather makes your point about there would have been a lot of metalworking on a site like this in Alfred's time. So that's really quite interesting. That ties in quite nicely with the geophysics work. But even this morning they were saying there's a lot of not exactly iron objects in the ground, but a lot of ferrous activity, you know, like smithing and that sort of thing. And we might expect that on this site, you know, because of, you know, arming people up and getting them ready, if it's of that period.
Well, of course, it
we'll
could
have
be
to get
earlier,
this.
couldn't it? As could this.
It could, but we would have to get this looked at, I think, by, you know, a specialist in iron.
I thought I'd do a little bit of work to try and make these people live a little more in terms of their philosophy.
Moment.
I wouldn't be so presumptuous. No, we were talking about how few sources there were to make, for instance, Guthrum come alive. So I've been looking at some of the sagas to give you some kind of impression of their, literally their philosophy of blood and bloodletting. This is from a number of different Viking sources, their sagas, basically. The brave warrior who often gave swollen flesh to the raven, marked men with the point of the sword's edge. The givers of plenty to the raven, who long were hateful to the English, went up into the land from the ships, and Gyalp's stud horses waded in blood, and the wolf pack got plenty of wolves' fodder. And he goes on, I mean, there fell the oaks of Odin before the flashing sword in the play of iron. There was thrusting of points and gnashing of edges. It's great stuff. Now,
They're baddies, and we're definitely on Alfred's side.
Now, this is my point. This is my point. You read Asa, the holy man of God, writing about Alfred. He destroyed the Vikings with great slaughter and pursued those who fled as far as the stronghold, hacking them down. He seized everything which he found outside the stronghold, men whom he killed immediately, horses and cattle. It's great. Now,
So they're all as bad as each other, and the whole lot should have been sunk.
well, yes, but of course you cannot judge people that long ago in terms of the present. They'd been raised as survivors, and some of them did, but a lot of them didn't.
Nice to see a bunch of archaeologists looking so excited. They're usually so flipping non-committal. Anyway, tomorrow we'll see if we can pick out the remains of Alfred's Abbey from those ruins, and we'll also see what else we can find on Athelney. Don't go away. Sunday morning, and there's still a lot of work to do before the team face the public with their findings at 6 o'clock. Chris is busy analysing this plan of the Abbey. Do any of these lines belong to the earlier Saxon church built by Alfred?
what we're going to do here is just try and move the sun around. And as we go around, we'll see that depending on the angle of the sun, we can actually identify the walls a little bit
So it's
clearer.
like picking up the shadows.
Yeah,
effectively.
yeah, really, it's like an aerial photograph now.
Victor is finishing off his picture of the Burgle-Hydage fortifications at Ling. Now, I've seen the site of these defences because Mick pointed them out from the helicopter, but I still don't understand. What was Burgle-Hydage?
So it was a scheme in southern England that was almost certainly invented by Alfred to have a number of defended centres against the Danes. And here in this orchard at the back of the church, the actual bank and ditch of the Burgle-Hydage defences are still here. And I brought this tape with me and some pegs because I thought we'd stake it out and actually see if it's the right sort of length.
Great.
And then we would actually be able to work out how many people defended this.
Yeah.
And this, of course, is the bridgehead for Athelney, which is behind us in that direction. So anybody approaching overland would come along this ridge, be cut off by this massive bank and ditch in front of us. They would then have gone into Ling itself and then out along the causeway to Athelney at the far end. And out there is the undefended area.
This is the ditch down here?
Yeah. I'm glad you're doing that rather than me.
Here's the ditch.
You imagine that deeper.
Yeah.
Because it's all filled up with rubble, and you imagine me higher and then a fence along the top.
It's not fantastically steep.
No, but you've got to imagine that silted up a lot. It's probably another 6 or 7 feet deep. This bank's eroded, and there's a fighting platform on the top, and there's chaps throwing scorn and derision on you, amongst other things, from the top here.
I'm used to that.
Right, what I think we'll do then is go from the corner of the churchyard up there. If you'll take that with you, hang on, Tony, I'll give you a peg. It doesn't need to be very firmly in, but just so that we can get a first 200 feet along the front here. We'll have to go round the trees as well. Go to the corner of the churchyard over there. We'll turn him into an archaeologist yet. OK, stick that. That's it. OK then, Tony, come on down. I'll just tell you what we've done. Right, that's 200 feet from the wall.
Yeah.
And because of what the Burgle-Hydage says, which I've got the crib here, there's 100 hides attached to East Ling. That's an area of land at that time.
So a hide doesn't mean a skin, it just means
no,
like an acre.
It's like an acre, but it's about 120, 150 acres. It might even be a bit more at that time. And there was one man from every hide. So that means there's 100 men coming to defend this defence at East Ling. And we know that in each pole, that is each 5.5 yard lengths. Remember in the back of the exercise book at school, a rod, pole or perch, yes, right? Yes. Each one of those is defended by 4 men. And so by a roundabout way, we can work out that the length of defences across here was 412.5 feet. In other words, about 200 and odd feet on each side. And this ditch on this side were running from the marsh up to the centre of the ridge and then down over the other side to the marsh, the other side. And we've just measured 1/2 of that. And indeed you can see the profile of the bank and the ditch from this side. So what appears to be a fairly insignificant earthwork in this lady's orchard, actually goes right back to Alfred's time, and indeed was part of the main defences of the site at that time. It's actually an early piece of bureaucracy.
It's your call-up papers.
It's more or less, yes. Great. How you doing there, John?
Yeah, not too bad if it wasn't for the damn roof drop. Yeah, what we're trying to do is we're not having much success in actually tying down this fort that Kerenza's got on the AP.
We've got lines on the air pictures.
We've got some sort of correlation with the magnetic, but nothing really that coordinates well.
Yeah.
Chris is actually looking at it at the moment, trying to get the digitised plans to match. Right. So what we've decided to do is actually, because we've had so much success with the resistance technique on the Abbey, it is to do some resistance transects here.
Ah, right.
And if there are major ditches here, And if we haven't seen them magnetically because there's no magnetic contrast, then we may be able to see them with the resistance.
Could you tell me, in words that a Beano reader would understand, exactly how you achieve the results that you do?
Yeah, basically what we've got here is a box of electronics. Inside are some batteries. They're sending the electric current into the ground through one of the probes. The other probes actually measures the resistance of the Earth to that passage of the current. We've got a couple of probes on the far side that make the circuit. And so you've got current flowing into the ground. And we take readings at metre intervals. You've seen us moving the frame up and down. And at each point, we're measuring the resistance below the ground there. So if you've got a stone wall at that point, the electric current goes into the ground, bang. You get a high resistance because the current won't flow through the wall. If you've got a waterlogged ditch in the ground, then the current passes easily through the water because it's moist, and so you get a low resistance. So by taking readings on a detailed grid, we build up a picture of these resistances, and so we can actually plot the high resistances, plot the high walls, plot the low readings, plot the ditches that are waterlogged.
Why can't all scientists talk that?
They do.
Well, not all scientists read the Beano.
What we're doing here is the result of your good work all day yesterday afternoon.
Well,
and you found some very interesting new stuff.
Well, it's interesting in that, you know, just to see how we're actually extrapolating from our ground plan to the excellent construction here. We've got this very clear major alignment along here, but in fact it's out of alignment with this little area over here. Now it looks as if this is incorporated within the large part of the church, but I'm just wondering if it's a different phase.
Yeah, the interesting thing about that is, of course, that it would correspond exactly to what we think would be in the size of the first Alfred church.
Oh, well, we'll have to try and...
Exciting new discovery.
And see where else we go.
That's great.
So, not long to go before the presentation to the public at 6 o'clock. Chris has highlighted what may be an earlier phase of building among the ruins of the Abbey site, possibly the first evidence of Alfred's church. The geophysics results on the fort site have also been processed. And although there's no new evidence to support Carenza's round fort theory, sorry about that, Carenza, they do have very good evidence of two ferrous ditches. Now these, combined with the large quantities of iron slag found by the field walkers, indicate that this was once the site of massive industrial activity. So what we need now is an expert on slag. Chris has phoned up his mate in Bradford, who is, what is he, an industrial archaeologist?
He's an ancient technologist, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's driving down in his Renault 5 from Bradford to here in order to be able to report back on it.
Will he get here in time, though?
Well, let's hope so. Anyway, we have very few minutes left. Jerry, what were you doing when you got Chris's phone call?
I was just about to go out and dig the allotment, but when I heard about this, I was slightly more excited.
What was it about the phone call that made you be prepared to jump in your car and drive from Newcastle all the way down here? Oh, from Bradford.
Yeah. This slag is, this material is a waste product of iron smelting. It's the residue, the stuff they threw away. Iron smelting slags come in a variety of shapes and sizes, and they can be characteristic of certain periods. And when Chris described the slag to me, it immediately brought parallels in my mind to say either it's Iron Age, or possibly Iron Age, or possibly Anglo-Saxon. So by looking at it now in the hand, I'm much more happy that it's probably of Anglo-Saxon date.
And why is it particularly exciting that it's here?
Well, the other sites that we've got this sort of slag from are all further to the east, mostly concentrated around East Anglia. There's quite a few around there, suggesting perhaps that this slag technology is associated with peoples coming in, perhaps it's Anglo-Saxons, Jutes or whatever. Yeah. But we've got it around as far as Southampton is the furthest west that I've been able to identify it. So this now pushes it a lot further west. Now, so whether or not this has to change our opinion of who is actually doing this technology will have implications for us who are interested in the technology of iron.
Can you tell any more specifically, other than you think it's Anglo-Saxon, when it might have been? I mean, could we, for instance, say that there's the possibility that it was around during Alfred's time?
I think, yes, I would have no worries about that. I mean, the problem is we're dealing with such few sites that each site's an individual and can alter the pattern or our impression of what's happening in this technology very dramatically. So I have no worries at all. All I would say is probably pretty definitely post-Roman, but perhaps 10th or 11th century AD. But I can't be more exact than that.
That's pretty good. Yeah. That's worth a trip down from Bradford.
It certainly was.
Thank you, all of you, for coming, and a very big thanks to all the friendly farmers and field walkers and local archaeologists who've helped us this weekend. We've had a brilliant time. We came here in response to a letter from the Morgans over here. No doubt about it, it's been a very successful weekend. The geophysics work has produced the first ever picture of the medieval abbey, and also the outline of an earlier building which could be the remains of a smaller abbey built by Alfred. Victor's drawings, I think, show very clearly how different the landscape looked in Alfred's time. The island itself, surrounded by salt marshes, with the causeway linking it to Ling and the bridgehead fortifications. But the discovery of the two ferrous ditches and the lumps of slag from the fort site is in many ways the most important development of all. It may mean that we found the first evidence of the place where Alfred made his swords and other weapons used to defeat the Danes in 887. There was one other question. Why was Alfred known as the Great? Well, he was our first ever literate king, which must have been quite a step forward. He was cultivated, magnanimous, and he united his people and defeated the dreaded Vikings, thus ensuring the survival of the English nation. Sounds reasonably great to me. And of course, he managed to find his way through these swamps and marshes. And that's not easy, believe me.